Hello, everyone, and welcome to this expert webinar offered to you by getAbstract. We're so glad that you are joining us today from all over the world. As we all are shifting to home office, many of us, we have time to do a lot more things like this in the digital space. So we are so glad to be able to offer this to you today, and we're so glad that you are joining us, hopefully from a healthy, safe distance, obviously, but we're very, very glad to see all of you here. We're going to dive into a really, really great conversation today with Selena Rezvani, who is over there on the other side of the screen, and I'm going to introduce her in just one moment. But first, I'll let you know, my name is Kirsten Miller-Daberman. I'm going to be the host for today's conversation, and we're going to be doing some polls as well as offering you the chance to ask Selena some questions. So stay with us throughout the conversation. Tune into that polls tab as we ask you some questions to look for what you're dealing with in the office, and we really want to make this a conversation. A couple things I want to let you know, just housekeeping items before we dive in. One of them is that this webinar is a part of a get-together series that getAbstract is doing. We know that people are home, they're on their computers, and also that people are in need of resources and want to hear from the experts. And so we've created this series, Get Together, where every day we're going to be doing little interviews with authors, experts, speakers like Selena, broadcasting on webinars, but also live from our Facebook page, as well as our YouTube channel. So if you want to get more information about these get-togethers and you want the details on when to tune in your time zone, you can sign up for our Get Context newsletter. It's free, and you can sign up for that on the getAbstract.com homepage or on our journal, but it's right there at the top. So if you want more information about these get-togethers so you can hear from the experts for free online from your home office, you can feel free to do that. So I am going to actually put a link to sign up in the chat box here. Sending it out to all participants. So let me know if you receive that, if you have any problems accessing it, but we want you to be a part of these conversations, and I'm going to be hosting some of them. Others from the getAbstract team are going to be hosting as well, but it's a chance for you to see us to connect with you, and to get you those really, really valuable resources that we all need right now in order to make decisions that are going to benefit ourselves personally, our families during this difficult time, and of course, our organizations and our businesses. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Selena, and we are going to dive into our topic today, which is about disrupting gender bias in the workplace and learning how to become an ally, whether that's from home office or in a workplace when we get back to that point. So Selena, welcome to the show. Welcome to the webinar.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here and have loved getAbstract for a long time. So this is an honor.
Absolutely. Let me just read your bio for those who are listening so they can hear a little bit of your background before we begin. Selena Rezvani is an author, a speaker, and consultant on leadership. Selena lives in Philadelphia with her family, including her young twins, and is a regular contributor to media, including Forbes, Philadelphia Magazine, and TEDx. She has a really great TEDx talk if you haven't watched it. In this webinar, Selena is going to be discussing how different types of bias hinder the creation and success of an inclusive, engaging workplace, and how we can all play a part in changing that. Selena will provide honest, frank guidance on self-advocating and advocating for others, and why it's now more important than ever to be an ally as we navigate these turbulent times. So Selena, before we talk about this topic, how are you doing? Give us an update. As we mentioned in your bio, you've got twins, you're working, you're staying at home. What is life like for you, and how has it changed since the outbreak and this massive paradigm shift that we're all experiencing?
Yeah, well, I learned a new term recently, and it's comfort baking. And so I found that I am doing a lot of comfort baking right now. I have moved on from all kinds of territories, from bread to dessert. I find myself doing that a lot as a way to kind of channel some of this energy. No, but really, like a lot of people, my kids are home. Their school is canceled indefinitely, and they are my new coworkers. So, it's a juggle, to say the least. It's a juggle, and I think it's been a real lesson for me and a lot of other caregivers in extending some grace to yourself, some grace that some balls are going to drop in this period, and that's okay. That's something I'm trying to tell my kids and tell myself, kind of at the same time as we all cope.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, our thoughts and go out to you and all of those parents who are juggling working from home as well as being a parent now. And give yourself grace is a really important thing, I think, for us all to remember. So to start, you've been addressing this issue about gender bias for years. And I'd love for you to just start by telling us what got you passionate about this to begin with.
Yeah, well, I know what it feels like to give the world a kind of watered down version of who you are, because you're worried about fitting in. I have lived that. I'm half Pakistani. I'm half Ukrainian. I was raised in the United States in Philadelphia. So in many ways, I have felt like I don't belong in plenty of groups, right? In plenty of groups. Fast forward to adulthood as a young management consultant, I'm, in C-suite helping leaders improve their workplaces. And I felt so aware of how I was different and how I was in the out group compared to those leaders I was advising, right? I'm brown skinned. I'm 5'2" tall, with, if anyone doesn't know, is short and young, female. I looked in every way the opposite profile of the leaders that I was advising. And, I got very good at kind of sitting on the sidelines of conversations, not giving my all, my best ideas, my best contributions. And it's terribly constraining, to feel that way. It's not a good look for anyone. It's not a good feeling. And as I looked around, I started to see more of that, not just in me, but in others in the workplace. So I started using those consulting skills I learned doing focus groups, doing surveys, to focus on gender inclusion specifically. How can leaders, use data and research to make their workplaces more engaging for women, places where women want to stay and really build careers for the long term. So that's some of how I got to where I am.
Absolutely. And I can imagine even some of the most well-intentioned or well-meaning people can be unnerved or bothered by this topic. And I'm sure there are some people who are listening to this today who, some who are really on board and really care passionately about this issue, and others who might be here because they're trying to fulfill a diversity, checkbox that they need to do for their company, or they might be resistant because this issue has gotten a lot of attention in the media lately. So, obviously there's sensitivities on both sides. And I'm sure you've met similar objections when you've gone in and talked about this. Why, if there are people out there who are listening who might be objectors, why should they care about this issue?
Yeah, there are objectors. And the first thing I would say is, look, you're allowed to have your dissenting point of view. If anything, I think there's a lack today of forums at work to discuss these things, these uncomfortable conversations, to disagree in a civil way and debate and have these conversations that can be gritty. So first of all, if you're an objector, I invite you to the party enthusiastically. I want you here. I want you part of the dialogue. And I think I challenge workplaces in my job to do the same, right? That's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say is, if you value science and research, listen, there is scores of research, of studies that show women report the workplace that they experience sexism in the workplace, that 81% of women report that they have experienced this. So looking at that and so many other pieces of data, I'd encourage everyone to get wise, to get aware of some of the common gender biases that play out at work. Because if you care about innovation, if you care about making excellent products, if you care about people contributing in meetings, right? If you care about any of these things, your sales figures, your profitability, you would be wise to look at gender biases and, even more importantly, ways you can stop it in its tracks, right? So that you do get people's best thinking. You do get their lightning in a bottle best ideas. We all want that. And look at the times we're in. Have we ever needed, great ideas, people's best thinking so much as we do right now? So I'd say listen to the biases, There's a beautiful old proverb I love, and it says, the beginning of wisdom is to call things by their right names. When you have a vocabulary, when you have words and a vocabulary for bias, the beautiful thing is you can call it out. You can say, oh, there goes XYZ bias happening right in front of me. Here's some ways I can come back at that. So I would challenge and encourage anyone, listen to the terms, start to get familiar with them. Think of even one small action you could take for each bias.
Yeah, and actually, let's get some practice at hearing from people at our virtual table right now, because this is a great opportunity to do a poll. We would love to hear from you, and I'm going to put that poll here for all of you. The question is whether or not your organization is taking the right action to promote gender inclusion. Would you strongly agree, disagree, or strongly disagree? So we are going to launch that poll right now for all of you. And that is going to be up there for a little while, and we'll let you answer that. Obviously, it's all anonymous, so no one will see your answers. But it's just a really great opportunity to hear from you, and for you to reflect and think about it. Is my organization really doing this? And it might feel good for you personally, but it's a good opportunity as well to think about maybe interactions that you've seen yourself in meetings, or ways that you've seen other groups, just struggle. So we encourage you to answer honestly so that we can get a good sense of what is happening out there where you are working. So, Selena, my question for you while we wait for those poll results to come in is, how did you find such a nice, good, quiet place with twins probably running around the house to do this webinar?
I love that question. I really do love that question, actually, because I have a 50-50 partner. I have a really great, wonderful husband who's been a 50-50 parent with me since day one, since 2 preemie babies came home from the hospital, and he's with them right now. And I appreciate him for that, and could do more to acknowledge his help.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I know that's something that we've been talking about and discussing with some of our friends and colleagues as well, is adapting to this new work environment is a challenge, and is bringing these roles of gender into play even more, because now you have not only the splitting of the work responsibilities, but childcare as well as home care. And I heard a very, very sad statistic that actually divorce rates in China were going up as a result of people being quarantined together. But I actually think that we can choose to see it as a great opportunity to learn more about each other and learn how to work better with people. And when we learn better how to work with people in our own household, that actually translates really, really well to the workplace.
I think so too. And I think right now, if you look at it, it's the ultimate exercise in empathy. If you are not the lead caretaker in your family and suddenly it's thrust upon you, you're getting a major dose of empathy, what it's like to be that person and to juggle and balance. And I think the world would be a much stronger, better place if we did more perspective taking, put ourselves in that other person's shoes.
Absolutely. So I just closed the poll, and I just want to share the results really quickly. The question was, of course, my organization is taking the right action to promote gender inclusion. 35% of you strongly agree, 44% slightly agree, 9% in the middle, 10% slightly disagree. And this is really actually great to see that only 2% of you strongly disagree. So that to me is hopeful that people and companies, organizations are starting to get the right message, and that more importantly, people working within those organizations feel and sense that their leadership is making a change. Selena, does that seem about right with you as a consultant who goes in and talks about these issues a lot? Are people starting to change, and is that change coming, in your view, from an authentic place?
Yeah, so I would say, first of all, 79% combining the 2 agree categories is pretty positive. That's more positive even than what I tend to see. So I'm glad people maybe are joining from more progressive workplaces even. But I think there's room to grow. I think if we want to change authentically, one of the best ways is to include a wide swath of people. A lot of times I go into organizations and they if they run a women's initiative, they only include the senior most women. That's a mistake. So I think the most authentic change comes when you really include different people, the hourly workers, the salary workers, people at this level, people at this level. It's really important if you want that change to be embedded in that
Absolutely.
culture.
Yeah. So you talked about identifying and naming certain biases specifically. So let's get right into those. The first one, well, before we do that, because you've got a great optical illusion that you want to share, and I think this is brilliant. So let's talk about the importance of recognizing bias to begin with. Why is that the starting place in your mind?
Yeah, well, Anna, our wonderful webinar guru, I'm going to ask you to launch that slide, if you would, because I want to do a little experiment with you all. So once we have that up, we can look together at some images.
Yeah, the first image is up there of the
Okay.
FIFA. Yeah.
Perfect. Great. Excellent. So let me ask you a question. What do you see when you look at this particular image? You can chat it to us on the toolbar on the right, or you can just kind of name it to yourself what you're seeing, a bird, a plane, a person, whatever it is you may see. And I want to give you a second to do that. And so what this is, I'm going to reveal it, is the 2014 FIFA World Cup logo. And what it's meant to show is hands kind of outstretched like this, holding a ball. Okay, and you can go to the next slide, please. But what a lot of people see instead is a face palm. A face palm, the thing we do when we're embarrassed, right? We just did something really embarrassing. And so what I'd like you to do is advance to the next slide, please. If we go back to that original view, right, the original logo, you'll probably notice it's very hard to unsee the face palm. If you didn't see it the first time, it's very hard to unsee it. In a similar way, I want to share some biases with you, right, so that you can recognize them, you can see the shape and pattern of them, so that you can't unsee them. Okay? Because that awareness is really the beginning of this process. So with that, one of the points I want to make before we look at that first one, and I think it's a hopeful point, is that while some of the stereotypes that uphold bias may be automatic, may be unconscious, what we do with that stereotype is in our control. And so I want to repeat that. Stereotype, activation, the idea that pops into our head may be automatic, but stereotype application is in our control. And that excites me. That's something that gets me up every morning, gets me excited to do sessions like these for allies.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the first bias, one of the most prominent, called the tightrope bias. What is it and how does it manifest?
Yeah, these are kind of inconsistent, contradictory expectations of how women should behave. And a famous example comes from a case study of Heidi Roizen. She's a Silicon Valley venture capitalist, a very successful one. And she was the subject of a case study at Columbia Business School. And the professor there, Frank Foley, he gave half of his class a case study describing Heidi Roizen's success. He gave half of his class a study about her and asked them to analyze it. And he changed one word in that study for the other half of the class. He changed Heidi to Howard. And what he found in asking students to analyze those cases was that they said both Heidi and Howard were both competent equally, but only Howard was likable. And that right there is the tightrope bias. That is the tightrope bias. The takeaway is that women can be seen as too feminine, where they are liked but not respected, or too masculine, where they are respected but not liked. maybe you've heard terms like ice queen or, queen bee, some of the negative terms that go with competent, but not liked. And it's interesting, we even see this in people's preferences, like around robots, testing humans' preferences for robots. People don't like it when a robot is an assertive woman's voice. It may explain why lots of our AI kind of assistants are women. Cortana, Siri, Alexa, right? All of these order-taking AI features tend to be women. And this comes from stereotypes where we expect women, to be communal, helpful, sensitive interpersonally, where we expect men to be competent, self-reliant, always improving their position. And these are some pretty ingrained, rigid stereotypes in many cultures, right? Not just one or two, but many cultures, so that when people act out of stereotypes, they can get some pushback for that. They can, in the case of Heidi, be not liked. One of the most common ways this can come up in the workplace is through interruptions, where we see women are 33% more likely to be interrupted and talked over. And that the higher you go in an organization, the more likely you are to interrupt. So think about that for a minute. We were all junior people once. Maybe some of you are junior right now. That's a really delicate power grab to get the power back from someone 2 levels above you, who's talking over you, who's finishing your thought, who's, cutting you off. And so some of the ways we can interrupt this bias, the tightrope happening that may come through interruptions, is to put the spotlight back on the person. You see a woman being talked over in a meeting that you're attending, go back to her, say, Karima, you had a thought there. Or make a non-judgmental observation. You can say, Kirsten, that's the 4th time you've been cut off. Let's give you, the stage. Let's give you the microphone back. You can set operating norms as a team. Here's how we're going to function as a group when it comes to communicating and sharing our ideas, right? You can even I love doing a go-around. After you've had a meeting, let's all share one concern we have about the new direction and one opportunity we see. So you're, modeling for people. Everyone here is expected to contribute. Everyone's got equal airtime. Just some of the ways you can combat that when it manifests as interruption.
So great. So the second gender bias that you identify is the maternal wall bias. So how do we recognize this one? And I would love for you to include in your answer to this how we recognize it, and then within the context that we're experiencing now with more of us working from home and mothers having to also shoulder a lot of duties at home with the kids, how is this maternal wall bias manifesting itself now in our current context?
Yeah, so the maternal wall, this is quite a picture, isn't it? It's kind of the brick wall, so to speak, that women face when they become moms. And it's this perception that their commitment and their competence is judged not so nicely, and that sometimes the juicy opportunities kind of dry up when you become a mom. Maybe you've heard of the term mommy track. It's that not so glamorous, career trajectory where you're taking lower level opportunities to make your life balance work, right? One of the best illustrations of this comes from a Cornell study. And in this Cornell study, they had equal candidates applying for jobs, right? Putting in resumes, job applications that were equal. And some of those subjects indicated that they were mothers or fathers. What they found is the group most likely to be penalized in terms of judgments about their competence and starting salary were mothers. What's interesting is dads were not penalized. In fact, dads sometimes benefited from their dad status. So when my husband and I have a friendly argument about who's going to pick up our sick child from school, I joke with him that you will get a benefit from your colleagues for, being a dad in this situation. I will have my confidence, questioned. And so there is some truth to this, right? That we see this happen when women become moms. Sometimes it comes out that, in common. I'll never forget a CEO saying to me when I had newborn babies, I had my first speaking engagement after having my twins. And he said, my wife could never and would never do what you're doing right now. It's better to leave some of those assumptions, at home, to realize that not every happy parent looks the same. Not every happy father, not every happy working mother looks the same. So let's not make judgments and prescriptions about how to do it. I want to tell a quick story, which is that I was doing an ally session for some bankers, and a man stood up and he said, "This hits home for me. I had a woman return from maternity leave, and I had this wonderful opportunity for somebody to present and represent our company at a major conference. And I thought she would be great for it." And he said, "I didn't want to offer it to her because I didn't want to be insensitive, that she had just come back to work." And he said, "I wasn't going to, but one day it blurted it out and decided to offer it to her. And immediately she said, 'Yes, I would love to do it.'"
Yeah.
And he said that was so instructive for me. So the takeaway here is, don't make assumptions for that new parent. Always offer the opportunity. Always offer the opportunity. And let them know, listen, this isn't the one and only. You can have an out if this isn't right for you. There are more opportunities that come around. But right, not all happy families look the same. You mentioned something I think really important, which is navigating this new normal right now as parents. And I think it's, as I said, extend grace to yourself, extend some grace to others. Not everybody copes with it like you do, right? Some people like to check in and be part of work at all hours. Other people, that's incredibly stressful, to do that since they're working from home and there is no leaving work. So extend that grace to other people. In my house, there's no illusion that mommy and daddy have this whole thing figured out. I'm pretty honest with our kids that we are figuring this out. You are safe right now, but we're all going to figure this out together. And there's no such thing as perfect. So, give yourself that. Don't expect perfection. Don't expect to mimic amazing teachers who do this every day.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Wonderful points. And I just love that. Do not make assumptions about anyone. And that's something that goes throughout life and whomever we deal with, but especially when it comes to women who are pregnant, are mothers, or are returning back to the workplace after maternity leave. So good. Last bias that we want to talk about is the prove it again bias. The last one, how does this manifest itself?
Yeah, you probably heard the expression, I have to work twice as hard to get half as far. And I wish that was just a perception, but there is a lot of data to show women and people of color need to keep proving competence to be judged equal. And that's a problem, right? It comes out, it manifests, for example, when we are judging candidates, the final candidate slate for an open role. We might judge, and surveys, and data backs this up, we may judge men on potential, what they can do, and we're less likely to do that for women. We're more likely to look at their past record, what they have done in the past. Well, that's a problem, right? Because we're giving somebody the benefit of the doubt. We're presuming intelligence or competence in one case. And on the other side, we're expecting somebody to show a record, to show proof of what they've done. And that creates an imbalance, right? A lot of those things, those small little moments add up in somebody's career. So if you're sitting in a hiring meeting and you're on the hiring committee and you're seeing women held to a different standard, a different criteria, go back to your objective criteria. You know, we said we wanted a PhD for this role and 5 years of experience, and we're bending that right now for this candidate. Okay, so prompt your team to go back to that objective criteria. You can even have a trigger of something that happens if somebody ignores the criteria. Here's what's going to happen. You know, we arbitrate that in some other way, or it kicks off another process. There must be a truly compelling reason to go off the objective criteria if we're going to do that, right? So you want to create that, because there's been a lot of litigation, by the way, of people who have judged folks on subjective criteria instead of objective.
So good. And I just want to let people know that we are going to be wrapping up here with Selena in just a few minutes. We've got 1 or 2 more questions, and we would like to get to some of yours as well. So if you're hanging in there with us, thank you. We know we all have busy work days, even though we're still just working from video conference. But we have a few little nuggets of wisdom that we want to hear from Selena. So we had the tightrope bias, maternal wall bias, as well as the again bias, which you just mentioned. And I would like to get to some of these questions because we do have a few, and one in particular that kind of lends itself to a question that I have for you as well. And one is, do only men make these assumptions about new parents? And that kind of combines with the question that I have about, you know, if women are sitting here watching this, we make assumptions about other women as well. You know, so are men the only ones that are making these assumptions, and how do women support other women well?
Yeah, so the answer is no, and maybe some of you have experienced this yourself, where a woman might have made an assumption about you and your commitment, your competence, your appetite to travel, whatever it may be, right? In fact, that's happened to many. So no, men aren't the only ones to make that assumption. How can women support other women? No matter what talk I give, somebody will ask this question at the end, because I think people want to see more of it, women supporting women. And I would say, when you see a woman leading, taking the reins, doing a behavior that's bold and wonderful and you want to see more of, celebrate it. You know, speak well of her. Speak well of her. Don't keep it to yourself and think, wow, she's awesome. Speak about it. You know, sell her leadership to other people. Tell her story. Tell the story of her victory. We need to see more of that, publicizing each other's successes, not just kind of privately fist pumping for that woman. I like to say, you know, get a contact high off of another woman's success. I think that's so, so important. And if you hear the catty negative talk, who does she think she is? You know, shut it down. Shut it down. Be that person. I ask the question when I consult to companies, what are the hero stories around here? What are the celebrated stories of employees? 90% of the time, they're about men. So make her the hero of a story, you know, tell her hero story.
I love that. Tell her hero story. It's beautiful. We are going to wrap up with one last question. I just want to let all of you know that this recording will be available to all of you post webinar, and also that we're going to be following up with several of the unanswered questions. Thank you guys for sending such great questions. I wish we could get to all of them, but we will be following up with on those unanswered questions in an article in the journal, in getAbstract's journal. So we're going to stay connected with you on this topic and make sure that we get those questions answered, and you'll hear more from Selena. Selena, last question for you. You've been so generous with your time, and we're so thankful that you joined us. What advice would you give to your junior self, to junior Selena?
Oh, that's such a good one. And it really goes back to our little visual experiment, which is I would give myself permission to face palm. You know, I'm a recovering perfectionist, and I think a lot of that showed up in my younger life and with my younger self. You know, get it just right, just perfect. Don't share an idea if it's half-baked or not fully thought through. And I regret that. I would love to encourage my younger self to make a mess, make some mistakes, Put the exciting idea out there. You know, you don't always need validation or an invitation to do that. You're enough.
So wonderful. Selena, thank you so much. It has been a pleasure to hear from you. You have such wisdom, and we're just very grateful that you could take the time to be here with us for this expert webinar. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. This was wonderful to be part of.
Yeah. And thank all of you for joining us on this Tuesday. And again, just want to remind you that we are going to be doing these every single day now, these get-togethers with experts. Not all of them are going to be this long, but we want you to be a part of that conversation. So make sure to follow getAbstract on Facebook, on our YouTube channel for those live streaming events every single day, usually around 5 p.m. here in Europe, 11 a.m. at the moment on East Coast US time. So stay tuned for more of those details, and you can always sign up for the Get Context free daily newsletter where you can get all the information about what's happening with work at home in light of the coronavirus, how you can be educated about that and get the latest get-together schedule. So with all that, wishing you a wonderful rest of your day wherever you may be in the world. Stay healthy, stay safe, stay distant, and we will see you again here for another virtual conversation soon. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.